Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Church at Home with Rachel. Today is the 6th of January, and it is Epiphany. It is that day that we celebrate the end of the Christmas season and the recognition that the wise men came to be with Jesus. They found him. And there are lots of stories about that, and there's lots of confusion about when that happened. My understanding, I'm not a biblical scholar, but what I learned in seminary is that the Epiphany actually happened when the wise men came, not sort of on the 12th day. They did not have superhighways and amazing fast, speedy transit back 2,000 some years ago. And the understanding is that the wise men actually arrived where Jesus was, which would not have been the inn or the manger at Bethlehem, but about 2 years later. Hence, when we celebrate the Feast of Holy Innocents on the 11th of January, we recognize that Herod called for the eradication, for the murder of all children under the age of 2, because he didn't know which one would be Jesus, so he was trying to eliminate them all, any possibility. So it's more likely that the star appeared in the sky, and the wise men from the east, the Orient, the astrologers would see that arrival. They studied the skies, studied the stars, and they would then say, okay, according to the history of the Bible, this would be the moment they would say, okay, the prophecy has been fulfilled and we will now go out. And it would be not a matter of throw our go bag that we had packed waiting for this moment in the back of the car and we're going to head down the highway and get there in a couple of hours or even a few days. This would have been a long journey, probably on camels across countries that they had not been through before, being led by the star. And I don't know how good your eyes are, but when I go looking for even the brightest star in the sky, other than the sun, of course, the only time I can see them is at night. So I imagine that the path they took wouldn't be real quick. It would take a while. And so this idea that this epiphany happened overnight, I think is not true. I think the idea is that this epiphany, this moment when they realized, was a long and drawn out process. From the moment that they thought, oh, is this the right thing? Is this inkling I have the right thing? It took them probably a couple of years, or many, many months anyway, to be able to follow through on that and finally come to be with the child Jesus, to bring their gold, frankincense, and myrrh, to recognize. And can you imagine the conversations they would have had, the three of them? We have no indication. Well, we don't even know if there were three of them. We have our songs, our hymnody, our Christmas carols, and our mythology, our stories have said there were three of them. Some people say there were four. But there isn't actually, I believe, anything in Scripture that points out and says there were actually three. It just says the wise ones, or the wise men, the Magi, the astrologers, whatever your version, your translation says. It keeps it pretty vague, which is good because vague allows us to read ourselves into the story as well. And while there would be those who would argue that we shouldn't be reading ourselves into the story, we do it all the time. That is the whole point of listening to the story. If you've ever followed Gospel on the Go on with me on Sundays, that's the point, is listening to a story told 2,000 years ago almost, and recognizing that it still speaks to our hearts, to our minds, to our actions. Same thing with the Magi and the Epiphany. I've always loved the idea of an epiphany as that aha moment. And for some people, aha moments, they think they have to be like in that moment when it's like a light bulb goes on in the cartoon. That all of a sudden you went from darkness to light. You did not know and now you know. I have lived 53 years, and the more years I live, the more I realize my aha moments take a long time. It took me a long time to discover, to understand that I felt called to the priesthood. I mean, from a time I was a little girl until I was 27 years old, it took a long time for me to say, okay, yeah, this is what I'm called to do. The closer it got, the more it sped up like a snowball running down a hill, rolling down a hill. It picked up speed and picked up size, but it was a long time in coming. And I think for many of us, our aha moments are epiphanies, whether it's about relationships or our jobs or our politics or the way we think. It takes a long time, and that's a good thing because time means we have time to reflect. Taking our time means we gather information and we allow our aha moment, our epiphany to be informed by other people, by circumstances, by information that maybe we wouldn't have had in that light bulb moment when we just get it. Now, there are those moments when we just get it. There absolutely are. I really believe that. But I also believe that our epiphanies, when the light shines on it, when the star brightens up our vision that we can see what we're talking about, I believe that that can take a long process of time. Now, today I do want to jump into politics a little bit because 4 years ago today, we saw what did not look like an epiphany. Actually, I think in retrospect, it really was. We saw insurrection, and we saw people killed, and we saw other people hurt who would then go on to take their own lives because they couldn't live with what they'd seen or participated in. We saw the dark and dirty side of a community, of a society that was feeling unheard, who had been lied to and believed those lies and were unable to acknowledge that they had been lied to. And we saw what happened when people who tried to do their job, even though they didn't like doing it, tried to stand up and say, no, this is my responsibility. On January 6, 2021, which feels like a million years ago and yet feels like just yesterday, the world watched as one of the countries in the world that has had the ability to work through things, to have laws and practices and a constitution and things that say, you know what, even when we disagree, even when we don't, we completely believe the opposite of what is happening, they had law and order. And we saw that day disintegrate law and order. And we saw people from both sides of the aisle in Congress and in Senate cowering together, protecting each other, scared of what was happening. We saw the vice president who refused to leave, even though they had a, a, a scaffold had been built to hang him on the call of someone else that people trusted in and believed. We saw people in positions of power to which they had been elected stand up and do what they were called to do, even though it was not what they wanted to do. I have thought many times about Vice President Mike Pence standing up and hearing those and leading the group as they recognized and he acknowledged that someone else would be taking his position as vice president. That had to be difficult. And yet he did so with grace, and he did so with a leadership skill that spoke to who he was as a person, his integrity. Regardless of what we believe about his politics, what he did that day was what he was called to do that day. What the Congress and the Senate did that day was what they were called to do for the most part. And we are now looking at today, or this week, a repeat of that day. And the wonder, will it go the same way? Now that the shoe is on the other foot, will the sitting president tell his people to revolt? Will his vice president refuse to give up her job to a new vice president? I think probably not. We need to recognize the epiphanies that have happened in the past 4 years. And while I recognize there will be many who will disagree with me and say that it's not my place to have any opinion about this because I'm Canadian or I'm a bishop or any of those things, the fact is that we are all responsible for our society. And if nothing else, we have learned over the years, especially after COVID, that our world really is a global village. We are closer to each other than we realize. The impacts of our decisions at home, in our cities, in our towns, in our countries, have impact around the world. And we cannot deny that. And so we need to pray that we will all be able to look back and recognize the epiphanies, the aha moments that were immediate and those that have been growing for us, the things that we have learned, even if we don't want to learn them. The truth, and recognize that in God's world there is only one truth. There is no fake news. There is no fake truth. There is no alternative fact. In God's creation, there is only truth. And it's our responsibility, each and every single one of us, whether we believe in God or not, it is our responsibility to use the gifts that we have been given for reason, for wondering, for compassion, for even balancing things to say, look, does this even make sense? To be able to do those things in a gentle way, a non-partisan way, not even a bipartisan, but a non-partisan way to say, does this make sense? And then to walk forward in that, knowing that for many people around the world, not just in the United States, where the world will change this week considerably, and more so come January 20th, the world, everyone needs to recognize, is this actually truth? And how do we live with it? How do we encourage truth? And how do we walk where truth is not being spoken, when we don't seem to have any power to alleviate that truth, or to bring in that truth when untruths are being spoken? Because they will be. They have been, and they will continue to be. The question I think we all need to ask is, how do we, like the wise men, seeking the wisdom that is incarnate in the baby Jesus, how do we in our own lives seek that wisdom? How do we prepare ourselves for that long journey that will help us to follow the star and not simply the loudest mouth on the TV, or the most provocative statements that are being uttered, or the things that make us fearful, because that's the way to control? How do we let go of our fear, like the wise men who left behind? If it took them potentially 2 years to find Jesus, it's realistically going to take them 2 years or more to go back home, because they were told, they were in a dream, that they should go back by a different way. Presumably, they went the most direct route to find him, and now they're being told to take a detour. So 4 years at least of their lives they gave up, because they were called to seek truth. So how do we follow their lead? How do we spend the next 4 years or more seeking truth? Even when we are told in dreams, don't go back that way. Don't go that way, because danger lies ahead. It happens for us. It's not just politics. It happens all the time. You get that gut feeling when you're on the road that, I think I'm going to turn right here instead of going straight through. I'll go the other direction. Something tells us don't go that way. Something tells us don't have that conversation with that person right now. Something tells us don't make that decision right now, or you open your mouth to say something that you've already thought about and considered, and you're going to, this is my decision about this, and you open your mouth and something completely different comes out. Follow that gut instinct. Follow that sense of who you are and who you're called to be, and how you're the best of who you are. Listen to that, because truth is within you. You have the capacity to discern what is true and what is not, what it is you need to be wary of, and what is simply fear-mongering. Use this time, especially as we think about this day and what happened 4 years ago. Use this time to reflect on what it is to look for an epiphany, what it is to have that light bulb flash on, what it is to know that no matter how difficult it might be to follow that star, that's what you're called to do. Not to be distracted by the neon lights or the flashing lights of a police cruiser, or all of those other things that grab our attention. Follow the one steady light that is the true and right way. And if we all do that, then we will have our epiphanies, and we will help to bring peace to our world, just as the Magi, the wise men, the wise ones, brought gifts to Jesus. We will bring our gift of peace and encouragement and long-suffering and patience and wisdom to our world as well. as we live through our memories of that January 6th, and we look to what this January holds for the world. Let us do so with hope. Let us do so with a desire to place our trust in the one who created the real truth, and not waver from looking at that light. God bless you, everybody. I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel. Have a great day.